So I'm going to introduce our second speaker, who is Roni Neff. And before I introduce her, for those of you who don't know, Roni has edited this large book on food systems. And so for those of you looking for kind of a textbook, but actually the chapters, I would say, are very conversational in their textbook. It's a very accessible textbook. She's made this great reference text that is just a nice piece to reference to understand kind of all of these topics across the food system. So Roni was also a member of the Workshop Planning Committee and of the Food Forum. She is an associate professor of the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health's Department of Environmental Health and Engineering and Health Policy and Management. She also directs the Food System Sustainability and Public Health Program at the Johns Hopkins Center for a Livable Future, which is an academic center focused on food systems and public health. And Roni is going to continue the conversation and stage setting, talking about systems thinking and food systems, but she's also going to bring a really unique perspective on the future of food systems. So, which is a big thing to tackle. So please welcome Roni to the podium.
Thank you, Jen, and thank you to the staff. And I'm really excited about the next 2 days and the kind of talks that we're going to hear about the innovations and the future of the food system. You'll see in this graphic, there's kind of two angles on future. Is it like what's out in space, or is it like going back to the roots? We'll talk about both. So I'm just going to start by talking about why it's important, stepping back a little bit. And then I really want to do some framing and ways of thinking about the next 2 days on innovation, talking about the history of the future of food, the future of the future of food. We're going to talk about, over the next 2 days, innovations in all of these areas. Some of them track the food chain, and some of them go broader into other this list tracks the food chain somewhat, but it also goes broader, and the talks will go much broader. Food production, processing, and packaging, alternative forms of food production, food distribution, marketing and value chains, data and analytics, addressing waste, food access, and affordability. And then I'm going to talk further, kind of building on Kate's talk, about a systems approach to thinking about these implications, and then I'm going to give you all a job. So first of all, I don't need to tell anybody in the audience this, but it's always good to remember that as we talk about all of these innovations, they play out across a massive food system that's very globally interconnected. And so it's using already, at the current moment, it's using half of our land is used for food production, 80% of our consumptive water use, 16% of our energy use. It's almost a fifth of our private sector jobs are in the food system. About 13% of our household expenditures are for food, and that's actually slightly higher than it's been recently, but it's very low in the context of history and globally. And it's very globally interconnected, so what happens in one place in the world in the food system is going to have ramifications here and vice versa, and outside the food system. The second key background piece is that we're at a critical juncture. And one of the pages in my Kate Clancy book is that there's nothing new under the sun, so we're always at a critical juncture. But we are at a very critical juncture right now. I focus on climate change, and so food is a key contributor of greenhouse gas emissions. And we talk about like 2030 as our deadline, but the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change is actually talking about 2020, like next year, for when our global greenhouse gas emissions must peak. And so we have to think about short-lived climate pollutants, one of which is methane, which is a key food system-related greenhouse gas. Food production and distribution and the nutritional value of food are at risk from climate change. But we can focus so much on climate that we forget all the other really critical environmental issues that we face in our food system. Biodiversity loss, water availability and availability of other resources, pollinators, population growth, crop yields plateauing, on and on and on. There's a lot of them, and I don't want to focus only on climate change. And of course, we waste 30% of the global food supply and about 40% of the US food supply. In terms of the critical reasons to focus on this, we also have 821 million people who are chronically hungry globally, and almost 12% of US households are experiencing food insecurity. In terms of health, I blew up the word dietary risks because that is the #1 risk factor for mortality in this country. Chronic diseases are, the major risk factor that we're facing. So we have to look at this from a variety of angles. So we're going to talk about innovations. The innovations that we are going to talk about are addressing some of these issues, and they're addressing many more. Going back to the framework of the 4 domains, health, social, economic, and environment, as I think about the innovations, what are they trying to do? They're trying to solve problems in these domains. And so what kinds of aspects of these domains are they trying to solve problems in? And I started listing them out, and then I was like, well, nutrition, what do we mean by nutrition? Well, it's food quality, food access, food quantity. Each of these we could extend on, and this slide was getting very busy, so I didn't extend it. But there are a lot of challenges that these interventions are addressing. And because of the criticalness, there's an urgency to addressing these challenges. Could be that. So as we think about innovating and moving forward and progress, my mind turns to a book called History of the Future of Food by Warren Belasco. And he gives a really interesting perspective that I think is useful for part of the framing of our future discussions over the next 2 days. We have this enduring interest in predicting the future. We all want to know what will happen, and we all want to talk to, who can tell us. The things that tend to get the most attention are either the most dire or the most gee whiz. A lot of progress is more incremental. We don't pay as much attention to it. We shouldn't lose sight of that as well. Another message that he gives is that the same metaphors recur again and again. And so in the context of future food security, there's this trio of approaches that have been going on for centuries, basically. Is it going to be that the Malthusian kind of conception that basically there's not enough food out there, we're all going to die? Or another type of approach is technology will save us. And then the third type of approach is we can sustain ourselves, but only if we increase equity. And that trio recurs up to today. Another message from the book is that studying past predictions can build a healthy skepticism. Because there's a wide variety in what is predicted. I'll show you some examples in a minute. Most of them are wrong. Some of them are right, but in various ways that we didn't originally think they were going to be right. And we also have to be wary of a lot of false choices. One of them that's put out there often is either we're going to build this technology or we're going to fail. And so we need to kind of keep that lens of skepticism. And then a third key message from the book is that what kind of predictions are out there say a lot about us as much as they do about the prediction, about what are our anxieties, what are our hopes, what are our assumptions. And so as you listen today, it's useful to think about that. What is it saying about us? And it's always, it's basically almost impossible to step outside ourselves and figure out, what are the things that 15 years from now we'll look back and say, well, that was how we thought about it then. But we have to try because being able to step outside and think about those things can help us understand them better and anticipate directions that we need to be going and approaches that we need to be taking. One more piece from that book, he talks about 3 approaches to the cornucopian future, or the idea that we will be able to feed ourselves. 3 types of approaches or ways of thinking about it. And the first one is classical, that the future is basically evolving from the past, and it just keeps getting bigger and better. And so the things that we would value in that would be like aesthetics and a kind of dominion over, increasing our dominion over land and resources. The second type of approach is modernist, where and this is, I think, how a lot of the thinking goes. We have these unprecedented drives. We need breakthroughs. And the things that are valued are function, simplification, streamlining, and technology. And then the third type of approach is what he calls recombinant, where we're splicing together the classical and the modern, which is how he describes things, kind of that's fairly dominant today. We want choice, we want convenience. The food system will be different from what it was before, but not too different. We take things from the bucolic past, but we modernize them. And framing really matters. What frame, which of those frames we choose, is it a Franken food or is it just a slight evolution from the past? That really matters in terms of how the public receptivity and other things. So here's a few fun examples from the Book of Past Predictions. In 1919, the American geographer said, "It is true that the farm tractor is on the way, but it has less prospect of displacing the work animal in food production than the automobile has of driving the workhorse off the road." And in 1930, Lord Birkenhead said, "The people of 2030, a century hence, would so prefer tastier, more digestible synthetic foods that agriculture will survive only in historical romances." So that's kind of early 20th century. As we move into the later 20th century, the future of food really looks like astronaut food. So what is futurism? It's astronauts. And that's how we're going to get our food home. I don't know if you can see inside that little ship, but there's grocery bags in it. And there's an emphasis on convenience and efficiency. And there was a lot of talk about food pills, and a pill has many benefits, including this idea that it could improve women's status because they don't have to cook, they don't have to clean. And so what is the future? What are we thinking about now? And as you start to Google future food innovations, a lot of these things are actually out there in prototype right now. So I have photographs, not ideas about them. But it still shows the kinds of things that we're thinking about today. So a robotic chef that'll do all your cooking and cleaning for you. This is in prototype, I believe. Pears shaped like babies. You put a baby mold on your pear as it's growing. It's apparently very popular in China. Edible spray paint. You could reduce the footprint of your burger by doing 3D printing. And this, again, is out there now. And here's one, a torte with a chocolate coating that plays sounds in a record player. And it was described on the website as playing music. You can see there's actually a video, and I pressed it, and I would call it sounds, not necessarily music. But. So what do we mean by innovation? So when you go to Google and check out innovation, you find out that it means the action or process of innovating. Very helpful. They also have a definition, a new method, idea, or product. So that is useful. And they also very helpfully tell us the plural noun is innovations. They also distinguish, there's a distinction between innovation and invention, where invention is like something that didn't exist and you invent it new, whereas innovation can be more gradual and sequential and building upon. We also use the word in the agenda, game changer, and what do we mean by that? And I know it's a word that is a little cringy to some, but the thing is, what we're really talking about here is all of these innovations, or a lot of them, may really change things in terms of what our food system looks like and what our society looks like. So whatever word you want to use, there is this potential for real change that we want to explore. And in these innovations, there's innovations that are purposeful, which is basically what we're talking about today. But there's also things that fit this definition that could be said to be somewhat more natural, like, climate change, et cetera, that are going to innovate and change what we do. If you have something that blows out the electrical system, that is an innovation, and it could also be game-changing. I want to highlight that innovation isn't everything. There's a whole group of social scientists called the maintainers, which I have recently learned about, and I find this fascinating. And they focus on the maintenance, the infrastructure, the repair, and the myriad forms of labor and expertise that sustain our human-built world. And of course, the maintainers, they're often lower income, often women. And we need to also give respect to that aspect of it and not only focus on the innovation as the future direction. And that's also important for things like preventing waste and sustainability. The other thing, and we found this in a number of our research projects, is how the people who are the so-called maintainers have a lot of tacit knowledge from doing the job. And so we researchers may come in from outside with all our ideas, but we would do well to ask them what are their ideas, what are their insights. for moving forward. I also want to highlight that technology isn't everything, and some of the major domains for moving things forward come in the range of human behavior. We humans, we're complex, we're diverse, we have unequal circumstances, we are irrational, we are both mistrustful of many aspects of the food system and also trustful where maybe we shouldn't be. And we have a variety of beliefs and belief systems, and we have to work with the complexity of who we are as people, and we can't only work in the technology realm, and we need to tailor our solutions and communication. So let me turn to the job for you. So basically, often when I sit in a session, I find it really helpful to do something to sort of keep me engaged, and what are the things that when I look at the list of who's in the audience, like the audience yourselves, including both the online and the on-site audience, are incredibly knowledgeable and interesting and coming from such a range of perspectives. So what can we learn from you about how all of these interventions might play out? So what we're going to ask you to do is for each session, and by session I mean a set of 3 or 2 or however many talks that go by, for each one of those, suggest about 3 potential implications for future food systems. And we're especially interested in ideas about the ways that these multiple innovations might interact. And we'll pull together the insights that you all share, and I'm hoping that there'll be something really interesting that comes of it. So we're going to ask you, there's a few ways you can do it, depending on whether you're on site or online or your personal preferences. If you're on site, you got this paper in your packet that basically asks for input. You can just write your responses on it. If you're online, or if you prefer it on site, you can go to that website, and you can, there's this form. It's like a polling form, and you can just click that Start Survey link, and it just gives you text boxes where you can enter your responses. If you prefer, you can also do something and email it into Cypress links. So there's many ways to participate. But we'd really like you to keep this going. I know this is the kind of thing that sometimes you could introduce in the beginning and then it sort of drops off, but we really want to encourage you and encourage the moderators to keep with this, because I think we can learn a lot from the group here. And again, just as a reminder, I won't walk through this again because Kate Clancy did it in great detail. But when you think about what might you write about, we're really, we're interested in going back to these principles, recognizing effects across the full food system, the full supply chain, the economic, biophysical, and social and political context. Consider all domains and dimensions of effects: health, environmental, social, and economic. Trade-offs, the 4 dimensions of effects: quality, quantity, distribution, and resilience. Account for system dynamics and complexities. And the last one here is choose appropriate methods. Appropriate methods in this case is like thinking about it, but part of the idea of this is that it could spark ideas for future research. So this is purely speculative, and we recognize that, and but it may give new ideas for moving forward, but not just in research, I should say, also in practice and in policy, in terms of how we address these issues. So you all have, in your packets, you have one of these, if you want to jog your memory about the types of things that you could think about in terms of these implications. And in my last couple of minutes, I just thought, if you're online and you want to find this, you just click on attachments, and then there's the audience input form. So I just thought I'd give a brief example from my own work to just do a quick practice exercise here. So I've got a big project, a 4-year project on wasted seafood, and so the dietary guidelines say we should be eating a lot more seafood than we're currently eating. And seafood often requires less energy, water, and feed than terrestrial food animals. But a key question is, where is that seafood going to come from? So our global fish harvests have peaked long ago, and aquaculture is basically currently about half of our food supply, but that also has high resource use. And previously, we had synthesized evidence that suggested that 41 to 47% of our U.S. seafood supply is wasted. So we're now trying to build on that by understanding where's that waste coming from, where's the resource use coming from. We're tracing seafood supply chains, and we're doing consumer research. And we know the largest portion of this is happening at the consumer level. And I should say that waste is equivalent to about 34% of the gap in consumption based on what we should be eating for nutrition. So here's an innovation, direct from frozen. And this is like, we all have a freezer, so it's not like an innovation that is, we're not inventing the freezer here, but we're saying, what if you never defrosted it? So most of the seafood on our shelves started out frozen, somebody defrosted it, and then they sell it to us, it looks like it's fresh. What if it was never defrosted? Then we would be much less likely to waste it, potentially, because, and so would the retailer. So Pete Pearson had this idea from World Wildlife Fund. A group from the Drexel Food Lab in Philadelphia went and created a set of recipes to prepare food direct from frozen. They consumer tested them. And so one of our case studies in this project that the USDA is supporting is to try and understand how might that go over, and what will this look like? The initial consumer response is that they're not at all willing to do it. When they find out it's chef tested, when they find out that most fresh was originally frozen, they're much more willing to. So that's the innovation. How might it play out? Just call out a few things. We'll just get a few responses from the audience on some of these domains, and I'll amplify them for the online group. Don't be shy. Just call out a few.
More affordable.
More affordable. It could reduce prices.
Safer.
It could be safer for food safety. There's less perishability.
Portion size.
Portion size. It could be it could be integrated into the types of recipes. Yes. Someone over there. It could be more nutritious, and it could also get people to eat more of this seafood because they're not so worried about wasting it. It could be flexibility in the meal plan.
More pressure on the seafood.
More pressure on the...
On seafood volume across the globe.
More pressure on seafood volume across the globe.
You might eat more because you don't have to go to the store as often to get fresh.
You might eat more seafood because you don't have to go to the store as often.
You need more frozen capacity.
You need more frozen capacity, and that means more electricity, things like that. So these are some great examples of how this could play out, and these are the kind of the responses that we want. And if you have more than 3 ideas, write them down. We'd love to hear what ideas you have, but please be relatively brief. Okay. So in conclusion, the innovations that we're examining over the next couple of days will change our future food systems and our social systems and our economy and vice versa. So we need to assess these future innovations with a broad food systems and systems lens. And we need to hold on to our healthy skepticism. We need to hold on to our sense of urgency about the problems we face and the ways these innovations can play out. And we need to keep a close eye on equity effects. So we are looking forward to your input, and thank you.